Arjun Mehta was the kind of man most people admired from a distance. At 34, he had built a successful software company from nothing. People called him a genius, a visionary, and even a perfectionist. He drove a quiet luxury car, lived in a sleek apartment that overlooked the city, and had everything a person could dream of. But when it came to love, his life was strangely empty. He had dated before, but none of those relationships lasted. Some women saw him only as a wealthy man to impress. Others found him too busy or too serious. Over the years, Arjun had grown tired of trying to find someone on his own. So when his parents suggested an arranged marriage, he didn't resist. It wasn't romantic in the usual sense. It was more practical, something to please his parents and bring stability to his personal life. His mother said, "You've worked so hard, Arjun. It's time to have someone by your side, someone simple, kind, and family-oriented." He nodded, half listening. Deep down, he thought a simple woman might mean a quiet home, less drama, and no competition. That idea felt comforting to him. He didn't want someone flashy or demanding. He just wanted peace. When his mother showed him a picture of the girl, Priya Sharma, he barely reacted. She looked plain, he thought. Not unattractive, but ordinary. Her photo showed her in a modest cotton sari, her hair tied neatly, a small smile on her face. There was nothing striking about her. "She's a school teacher," his mother added proudly. "Comes from a good family." "Very well-mannered," Arjun nodded again. A teacher sounded simple enough. He didn't want someone who would expect luxury or question his long working hours. He agreed to meet her not because he was excited, but because it seemed like the easiest thing to do. The first meeting was set at a quiet cafe chosen by both families. Arjun arrived early, as always. He sat near the window, scrolling through emails on his phone, half focused on work even in this moment. When Priya entered, he almost didn't notice. She walked in softly, wearing a pastel-colored salwar kameez, no jewelry except small earrings. She carried herself with calmness, almost too quietly for the lively cafe around them. When she sat down across from him, he looked up and gave a polite smile. "Hello," she said gently. Her voice was soft but clear. "Hello," he replied, closing his phone. The first few minutes were awkward. He asked her the usual questions, where she worked, what she liked to do in her free time, and so on. Her answers were short but thoughtful. She spoke about her students, how she enjoyed teaching art and language, and how she preferred simple things. Long walks, reading, spending time with family. Arjun noticed she didn't try to impress him. She wasn't overly cheerful or flirtatious. In fact, she seemed perfectly at ease being herself. For some reason, that made him a little uncomfortable. He was used to people trying to win his approval, but Priya didn't seem to care for that. He asked, "You like teaching children?" Her eyes brightened slightly. "Yes, very much. They remind me to see the world with curiosity again. It's easy to forget that as adults." Her words stayed in his mind, though he didn't show it. He nodded, finished his coffee, and the meeting ended politely. That night, his mother asked what he thought. Arjun shrugged. "She seems fine, quiet, simple." His father smiled. "Sometimes quiet people bring peace. You could use some of that." Without thinking too much, Arjun agreed to the marriage. It was arranged quickly, just as his family preferred. He didn't feel nervous or excited, just neutral. It felt like a business deal that needed to be completed. The wedding was small and traditional. Priya wore a red sari and her smile was gentle. Arjun performed the rituals, smiled for photos, greeted relatives, and went through the motions of being a groom. Everyone said they made a lovely couple. He wasn't sure what that meant. When they moved into his apartment after the wedding, Priya quietly began to make the place feel like a home. She didn't redecorate or demand changes. Instead, she added small touches. Fresh flowers in a vase, neatly folded towels, soft lighting during dinner. Arjun noticed these things but didn't comment. He continued with his work routine, long hours, late nights, and endless meetings. He wasn't unkind to Priya, but he wasn't attentive either. He assumed she was content as long as he provided for her. She never complained. She cooked simple meals, kept the home tidy, and always greeted him when he returned from work, even if he barely looked up from his phone. Sometimes she asked about his day, and he gave short answers. "Busy," he'd say, or "the same as always." She smiled and nodded, never pressing for more. One evening, he came home earlier than usual. He found her sitting by the window reading. The soft golden light from the lamp made her face look peaceful. For the first time he paused and really looked at her. There was something graceful about the way she sat. Calm, steady, almost like she belonged there. She noticed him and smiled. "You're home early." "Yes," he said, loosening his tie. "Meeting got canceled." "Would you like some tea?" she asked. He hesitated, then nodded. "Sure." As she walked to the kitchen, he looked around. The apartment felt warmer than before. There was a faint smell of jasmine from the candles she had lit. The cushions on the sofa had colorful covers he didn't remember buying. It wasn't dramatic, just small, thoughtful changes that made the space feel alive. She returned with tea and sat opposite him. They talked for a while, mostly about small things: the weather, her students, a movie she wanted to watch. For some reason, he found himself listening more closely than usual. Her way of speaking was gentle, yet there was quiet confidence in her tone. After she went to bed that night, Arjun sat by the window and thought about her. He realized he knew very little about his wife. He hadn't asked about her dreams, her past, or even her opinions. He had been treating the marriage like a formality. Still, he convinced himself that was fine. He wasn't in love, but he respected her. That should be enough, he thought. Weeks passed and their life settled into a rhythm. Arjun woke early, left for work, and returned late. Priya took care of everything at home without complaint. She was never demanding, never moody, always patient. But there were moments when he caught her lost in thought, staring out the window, her fingers lightly moving as if she were sketching in the air. He once asked, "What are you thinking about?" She smiled faintly. Nothing important, he didn't press her. But something about that answer stayed in his mind. One Sunday, his parents invited them for lunch. During the meal, his mother asked Priya if she had any hobbies. "I used to paint," she said quietly, "before my father got sick." "Oh?" his mother asked with interest. "You don't paint anymore?" Priya shook her head. "No time now," Arjun barely reacted. He didn't think much of it. Many people had hobbies they left behind. But that evening, when he came home and saw her carefully arranging flowers on the table, he wondered again what kind of person she really was beneath that quiet surface. She didn't seem like the type to talk much, but her actions spoke gently. The way she treated the house, the way she spoke to the maid, even the way she listened when he talked, all carried a kind of calm strength. One night, as they were having dinner, he mentioned an office event where spouses were invited. He told her she could come if she wanted to. Her face lit up slightly. "I'd like that." At the event, surrounded by Arjun's business friends and colleagues, Priya looked a little shy but composed. She didn't try to stand out, yet people seemed drawn to her quiet politeness. One of Arjun's co-workers whispered to him, "Your wife has such a calm presence. You're lucky." Arjun smiled politely but didn't know what to say. On the way home, he said, "You handled yourself well tonight." "Thank you," she said. "I was a bit nervous, but everyone was kind." He nodded. "You didn't seem nervous," she smiled. "Sometimes we hide what we feel." Her words lingered in his mind long after they returned home. That night, as he lay in bed, he realized that beneath her calm and simplicity, there was something he couldn't quite define. A quiet mystery. A depth he hadn't taken the time to explore. He had thought she was plain, ordinary, someone who would simply fit into his life without changing it. But slowly, almost invisibly, she was beginning to change the atmosphere around him. The house felt warmer. His evenings felt less lonely. Even his mother had noticed. "She's a good one, Arjun," his mother told him over the phone. "Don't take her quietness for weakness. Sometimes quiet people carry the biggest hearts." Arjun didn't reply, but he thought about it for a long time. He didn't know yet that the woman he thought was ordinary had a side to her that would soon surprise him. Completely. A side that would make him question everything. He believed about simplicity, strength, and love. The morning sun poured gently through the curtains, touching the corners of the living room where small changes had begun to appear. A new tablecloth, a few framed photos, soft plants by the window. Little things that made the place feel alive. Arjun noticed these things but rarely said anything. He was a man of few words, and old habits die slowly. One day he came home from work earlier than usual. His office had been hectic that week. A big project launch, investors to meet, endless calls. His head ached from the noise of the city and the constant pressure. As he entered the apartment, he expected the same silence he always walked into. But this time he heard soft humming from the other room. Curious, he followed the sound. Priya was in the kitchen, cooking. She was humming an old tune from a movie he barely remembered. The smell of fresh coriander and spices filled the air. She looked up and smiled when she saw him. "You're home early today," she said, wiping her hands on her apron. "Yeah," he said, loosening his tie. "Work wrapped up a bit sooner." "Then you can rest early too," she said kindly. "Dinner will be ready soon." He nodded and sat at the dining table. For a moment he just watched her move around the kitchen. Calm, steady, comfortable. There was something peaceful about the rhythm of her hands as she stirred the pot, tasted the curry, adjusted the flame. It reminded him of something he couldn't quite name. Maybe the simplicity of his childhood, or the quietness he had forgotten existed. They ate dinner together that night without much conversation, but it didn't feel awkward. For the first time, the silence between them felt warm instead of distant. After dinner, as she cleared the table, Arjun noticed a small notebook lying near the window. It had a few smudges of color on the cover. Out of curiosity, he picked it up. Inside were rough pencil sketches, small drawings of flowers, faces, and streets. Nothing fancy, but full of life. "These are nice," he said as she walked back into the room. She looked surprised. "Oh, those? They're just doodles. I do them sometimes when I have free time." "You draw well," he said honestly. She smiled softly. "Thank you. It's just a hobby now." He nodded and returned the book to its place, but that night he couldn't stop thinking about it. The lines were so clean, so full of expression. He wondered if she used to paint seriously. The next morning, as he was leaving for work, he asked casually, "You said you used to paint before, right?" "Yes," she replied, tying her hair into a braid. "I stopped a few years ago. Why?" She hesitated, then said, "Life got busy. My father fell ill. I had to take care of him. After that, I just never started again." He nodded slowly. He didn't know what to say. There was something sad in the way she said it, but also a quiet acceptance. Over the next few weeks, Arjun began to notice more things about Priya that he hadn't seen before. She had a habit of talking softly to the plants when she watered them. She left little notes on the fridge, reminders like "have breakfast before work," or "don't skip lunch today." She remembered everyone's birthday in his family and sent messages on his behalf when he forgot. One evening, when he came home late, she was sitting near the balcony with a sketch pad. He stood quietly at the door watching her draw. Her hair was loose and the soft light from the lamp touched her face. She didn't notice him until he spoke. "You still paint in secret?" he asked gently. Startled, she looked up and laughed lightly. "Not really. Just sketches. It helps me relax." He walked over and looked at the paper. It was a rough drawing of a woman sitting by a window, half in shadow. There was a strange sadness in it, yet it was beautiful. "You have talent," he said quietly. She smiled. "Thank you. It's just something I love." He nodded, unsure what to say next. Then, after a pause, he asked, "Why didn't you tell me about this before?" She looked at him thoughtfully. "You never asked." Her answer hit him harder than he expected. It wasn't rude or angry, just honest. He realized how distant he had been, how little he had tried to know her beyond the surface. That night, as he lay in bed, he thought about her words. "You never asked." He had assumed so much about her without ever truly listening. He had judged her quietness as plainness, her calm as simplicity. But maybe there was more to her, more that he hadn't taken the time to see. The next morning, he left for work feeling strangely unsettled. He couldn't focus during meetings. Even when he looked at reports and presentations, his mind kept going back to the image of her sitting by the balcony, sketching quietly. That weekend, he decided to do something unexpected. Without telling her, he visited an art supply store and bought a small set of paints, brushes, and a few canvases. When he brought them home, he left them on the dining table with a note, "For when you have time to paint again." When Priya saw it, she stood still for a moment, staring at the gift. She touched the brushes gently, as if afraid they might disappear. Later that evening, she came to him and said softly, "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to," he said. "You should do what makes you happy." Her eyes glistened slightly and she smiled in a way he had never seen before. "Thank you, Arjun." Over the next few days, she began painting again. Slowly, cautiously at first, but soon with more confidence. Sometimes when he came home, he would find her standing near the window, completely lost in her work. The house smelled of paint and turpentine, but it felt more alive than ever. He started looking forward to coming home. He'd ask her what she was working on, and she would show him. Sometimes a landscape, sometimes an abstract piece full of color. Each one seemed to carry a piece of her soul. Her laughter became more frequent, too. She told him funny stories from her school about her students and their innocent questions. He found himself smiling more, talking more. The quiet walls between them were beginning to melt. One evening, his mother called. "How are you both?" she asked. "We're good," Arjun said. "She's been painting again." "That's wonderful," his mother replied warmly. "She used to be so good, you know." "Your father and I saw some of her work years ago at a local exhibition." Arjun paused. "You did?" "Yes, before her father's illness. She even won an award once." He didn't know what to say. He had no idea. After the call ended, he went to the living room and looked at Priya's paintings again. Really looked this time. The depth, the emotion, the balance of color. There was nothing amateur about them. She wasn't just talented. She was gifted. When she came out of the kitchen, he said, "Why didn't you tell me you used to exhibit your art?" She smiled faintly. "That was a long time ago. I didn't think it mattered." "It does," he said softly. "You're amazing." Her eyes widened a little, surprised by his words. She looked away shyly. "I just didn't think anyone would care anymore." He took a step closer. "I care." That simple sentence changed something between them. For the first time, she saw genuine warmth in his eyes. Not politeness, not duty, but real interest. From that day on, their evenings became something to look forward to. He started spending more time at home, helping her set up a small corner in the living room as her art space. He even helped her order better supplies online. They began sharing quiet moments, watching the sunset, sipping tea together, talking about small things that suddenly felt important. It was slow, steady, and natural. One night, as she showed him a finished painting, a colorful cityscape glowing under rain, he said, "You should show this to the world again." She laughed softly. "I'm not ready for that." "Maybe not yet," he said. "But one day you will be." For the first time since their marriage, Priya looked at him differently, with respect, warmth, and a quiet affection that went beyond words. Later, when she went to bed, Arjun stayed awake, staring at her paintings. He realized how wrong he had been to judge her so quickly. The woman he thought was plain and quiet had more depth than anyone he had ever met. He smiled to himself, thinking how unpredictable life could be. Sometimes the people who seem simplest on the surface hold the most beautiful surprises inside. And though he didn't know it yet, this small spark, this rediscovery of her art, was only the beginning of a change that would touch both their lives in ways neither of them could have imagined. Arjun woke up earlier than usual that morning. The soft light from the window fell on the easel in the corner of the living room. Priya's latest painting stood there, half finished, still wet with bright strokes of blue and gold. He didn't know much about art, but something about it drew him in. It was a painting of a woman walking alone on a street full of lights, but instead of looking sad, the woman looked peaceful, as if she had found her way. He stood there for a long moment before leaving for work. The painting made him feel something he couldn't describe, a strange warmth that stayed with him through the day. At the office, his team noticed he was different lately. He smiled more, got less irritated, and even joined them for lunch. His friend and business partner Ritesh joked, "Looks like marriage finally did you some good." Arjun just laughed it off, but inside he knew it was true. Life at home didn't feel like a duty anymore. It felt like a space he looked forward to returning to. That evening, when he came back, he found Priya cleaning her brushes. There were streaks of paint on her hands and a smudge on her cheek. She looked up, surprised to see him early. "You're home," she said, smiling. "Yeah," he replied. "Couldn't wait to see how your painting turned out." She looked shy. "It's not finished yet." "It already looks great," he said honestly. She laughed softly. "You're saying that just to make me happy." He shook his head. "No, I mean it. You really have a gift." She didn't answer but kept smiling, and that smile said more than words. Over the next few weeks, Priya's confidence began to grow. She spent more time painting, experimenting with new ideas. Arjun encouraged her. sometimes suggesting colors, sometimes just sitting nearby, watching quietly as she worked. Their evenings had turned into a routine of shared calmness, soft music playing, a pot of tea on the table, and the sound of her brushes moving across the canvas. One night, as they were having dinner, Arjun mentioned something unexpected. "You know, I was thinking," he said, stirring his food, "maybe you should try showing your paintings again." "Like in an exhibition," Priya froze. "An exhibition? Me, why not?" he said. "You're talented. People should see your work." She looked uncertain. "It's been years. I don't even know how to start again." "I can help," he said simply. "I know a few people who organize events. We can figure it out." She hesitated, then said, "Let me think about it." He didn't push her. He wanted the decision to come from her, not from pressure. The following week, Priya received a call from one of her old college friends. They hadn't spoken in years, but her friend had seen one of her paintings on social media. "You're still painting?" her friend asked excitedly. "Just recently started again," Priya replied, smiling. Her friend insisted she join a small local art exhibition happening in a few weeks. It wasn't a big event, just a gathering of local artists, but it was a chance to show her work again. When she told Arjun about it that evening, his face lit up. "That's great news," he said. "You should definitely go for it." Priya looked nervous. "It's been so long. I'm scared no one will like my work." Arjun shook his head. "They will. And even if they don't, it doesn't matter. You're doing this for yourself, not for them." His encouragement gave her the courage she needed. Over the next few days, the apartment turned into a small art studio. Canvases lined the walls, brushes filled jars, and the smell of paint filled the air. Arjun didn't complain once. Instead, he helped her frame the paintings, bought new stands, and even learned how to pack them carefully for transport. One evening, as she was choosing which pieces to display, he said quietly, "You've changed the house." "You know?" She looked up, puzzled. "How?" he smiled. "It feels warmer now, livelier, like a real home." Her eyes softened. "Maybe because we both started living in it, not just staying in it." That simple sentence stayed in his heart. The day of the exhibition arrived. Priya was nervous from the moment she woke up. She wore a simple cream-colored saree with a light blue border. Nothing fancy but elegant. Arjun could see the nervousness in her eyes as she adjusted her dupatta. "You look perfect," he said reassuringly. "Do I?" she asked with a small smile. He nodded. "You do. Just be yourself." When they reached the gallery, Priya's heart was racing. The walls were filled with colorful artworks from different artists. She arranged her paintings on her assigned corner, 6 pieces, each carrying a story from her heart. At first she stood quietly, watching people walk by. Some stopped and looked closely, others moved on quickly. She felt a knot in her stomach. What if no one liked them? But slowly things began to change. A middle-aged woman stopped in front of one of her paintings, the one with the woman walking in the rain, and stared at it for a long time. Then she turned to Priya and said softly, "This one feels real. It reminds me of my own journey." Those words brought tears to Priya's eyes. More people came. Some asked questions, some complimented her use of color, some just smiled. For the first time in years, Priya felt seen, not as someone's wife or daughter, but as herself. Arjun watched her from a distance, feeling proud in a way he had never felt before. He wasn't proud of himself or his success, and he was proud of her. Watching her talk to people, explain her art with shining eyes, he realized how much she had been holding inside all this time. By the end of the evening, one of her paintings had even been sold, her first sale in years. The buyer, a local gallery owner, asked if she would be interested in doing a solo exhibition in the future. When they got home that night, Priya was glowing with happiness. She placed the small envelope with her payment on the table and said with a laugh, "It's not much, but it feels special." Arjun smiled. "It's not about the money. It's about you finding yourself again." She looked at him with gratitude. "I couldn't have done it without you." He shook his head. "You did it. I just reminded you who you were." That night, as she fell asleep, Arjun sat by the window thinking. For years he had measured success by numbers and profits, growth, achievements. But watching Priya today made him realize something simple yet powerful. Real success was not about wealth, but about finding meaning in what you love. The next few weeks brought even more change. Priya began receiving calls from people who had seen her work. She started teaching art classes to children on weekends. The apartment, once silent and formal, now echoed with laughter and color. Even Arjun's friends noticed the difference in him. "You seem happier these days," Ritesh said during lunch one afternoon. "I am," Arjun replied simply. "I think I finally learned what peace feels like." That evening, when he came home, Priya was working on another painting. He walked over quietly and stood behind her. "What are you painting this time?" he asked. She smiled without looking up. "Something about beginnings," he tilted his head. "Beginnings?" "Yes," she said softly. "Because sometimes we think life has already been decided for us. But then something or someone changes everything." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said quietly, "I'm glad I met you, Priya." She looked up, surprised by the sincerity in his voice. "I'm glad too," she said, smiling. From that night onward, their relationship wasn't just about companionship. It had turned into friendship, trust, and quiet admiration. Arjun no longer saw Priya as the plain woman he had agreed to marry out of obligation. He saw her as the person who had unknowingly taught him how to live again. As days passed, he began spending more weekends at home, helping her with her art classes, fixing small things around the house, or just sitting with her in silence. They didn't need many words, their comfort spoke for itself. Sometimes he thought about how differently things could have turned out if he had never taken the time to notice her. The thought made him grateful in ways he couldn't explain. And as the sun set outside their window one evening, he looked at her painting, the one of the woman walking under the streetlights, and realized that the woman in the painting was her, the one who had quietly found her own light, and in doing so had illuminated his world too. The months that followed were filled with quiet joy. Life had found a new rhythm in their home, one that was gentle and full of small, meaningful moments. Every morning, Priya would wake up early to water the plants on the balcony. The first rays of the sun would fall on her face as she smiled at the sight of new blooms. Arjun often watched her silently from the dining table, coffee in hand, wondering how something so simple could feel so peaceful. Her art had begun to gain attention. The gallery owner who had bought her painting invited her to take part in another show, this time in a bigger venue. She hesitated at first, worried she wasn't ready, but Arjun convinced her. "You'll never know until you try," he said with his usual calm smile. Together, they started preparing. Priya worked long hours in her little art corner, experimenting with new ideas. Sometimes she'd call Arjun over to ask what he thought. He didn't always understand the artistic meaning behind her work, but he liked the way she spoke about it, her eyes full of life, her hands moving as she explained her thoughts. One evening, she was working on a large canvas. It showed two figures standing apart, facing opposite directions. The sky above them was split, half stormy, half golden. Arjun stood behind her for a long moment before asking, "What does it mean?" She smiled faintly. "It's about distance," she said. "Sometimes people can stand close and still feel far apart. But if they're meant to find each other, life finds a way to bring them closer again." Her words stayed with him long after that evening. He thought about their own journey, how he had once seen her as distant and ordinary, only to realize how deeply wrong he'd been. As the date of the exhibition drew closer, Priya's excitement grew, but so did her nervousness. Arjun noticed her pacing around the house, rechecking her work, making small adjustments even when everything looked perfect. One night he found her sitting on the floor surrounded by paintings. She looked tired, her hands stained with color. He walked over, sat down beside her and said softly, "You've done enough for today. You should rest." She shook her head. "What if people don't like them? What if they don't understand?" He looked at her with quiet confidence. "You don't need everyone to understand. You just need to be honest with what you create. That's what makes it beautiful." She met his gaze and smiled. "You've changed, you know." He raised an eyebrow. "Me? How so?" "When we first met, you barely talked. You were always lost in work. Now you sound like a poet." He laughed lightly. "Maybe you're rubbing off on me." They both laughed, and in that moment, It felt as if all the distance that had once existed between them had faded away. The day of the exhibition arrived on a cool Sunday morning. The gallery was bright and full of visitors. Priya stood near her paintings, talking to people, answering questions, and smiling warmly. Arjun watched her from a distance again, feeling proud. Not the kind of pride that comes from success, but the quiet kind that comes from seeing someone you care about shine. Her section drew a lot of attention. People admired the way her art told stories. Stories about silence, emotion, and resilience. A local art critic approached her and said, "You have a rare gift. Your work feels personal, but it speaks to everyone." Priya thanked him with genuine gratitude. Later in the evening, when the event was winding down, one of Arjun's business acquaintances came over. He had never paid much attention to Priya before, but now his tone was full of admiration. "Arjun, your wife is incredibly talented," he said. "You're a lucky man." Arjun smiled. "Yes," he replied simply. "I know." That night, when they returned home, Priya was still glowing with joy. She talked excitedly about all the people she had met, all the conversations she had had. Arjun listened quietly, feeling content just watching her happiness. When she finally grew quiet, she turned to him and said softly, "You know, when I first married you, I was afraid. I thought you'd never really see me for who I was." He looked at her thoughtfully. "And now?" she smiled. "Now I know you do." That night, as they sat together, neither of them said much more, but they didn't need to. The silence between them was no longer empty. It was full of understanding. In the days that followed, Arjun found himself changing in more ways than one. He started leaving the office earlier. He began taking interest in things outside of work, books, music, even a bit of gardening with Priya on weekends. He had always believed that life was about achieving goals, but now he was learning that peace was just as important. One Saturday afternoon, as they were having tea, Priya said, "I've been thinking, maybe I should start teaching art again, not just to children, but to anyone who wants to learn." "That's a wonderful idea," Arjun said instantly. "You'd be great at it." She hesitated. "But I'm not sure if people will join. There are so many art teachers out there." He leaned forward slightly. "There are many, yes, but not everyone teaches with heart. You do." Encouraged by his words, Priya decided to start small. She put up a few flyers in nearby cafes and community centers. Within a week, she received messages from people interested in joining, young adults, homemakers, even a retired banker who wanted to learn painting for peace of mind. The first class was held in their living room. Arjun watched quietly from the balcony as Priya guided her students. Her voice was soft, patient, full of warmth. The students seemed completely absorbed, laughing and learning under her gentle direction. When the class ended, one of them said, "You make painting feel so easy." Priya smiled. "It's not about making it perfect. It's about enjoying it." Those words reminded Arjun of how she had changed his own view of life, from perfection to peace. One evening, a few weeks later, Arjun came home with a surprise. He had spoken to the gallery owner and arranged a small solo exhibition just for her, a showcase of her best works. When he told her, she was stunned. "You did this for me?" He nodded, smiling. "You've given me more than I can ever return. This is the least I can do." Tears filled her eyes as she said softly, "I don't know what to say." He replied gently, "Just keep painting. That's all I need." The solo exhibition turned out to be a beautiful success. The venue was filled with people who admired her art and her story. A woman who once gave up her passion, only to rediscover it through courage and love. Arjun stood beside her through it all, not as a rich husband showing off his wife's talent, but as a quiet supporter who understood that true partnership meant lifting each other up. After the exhibition ended, they walked home under the streetlights. The night air was cool and the streets were almost empty. Priya said softly, "Do you ever regret marrying me? I know it wasn't love at first sight." Arjun stopped walking and looked at her. "I don't regret it for a second. Maybe it wasn't love at first sight, But it's love now. The kind that grows slowly and stays forever. Her eyes filled with emotion, and she smiled. You've changed a lot, Arjun. He smiled back. You changed me. They walked the rest of the way home in silence, their hands brushing lightly as they moved side by side. In the weeks that followed, Priya's art continued to flourish. She was invited to collaborate on a project that used art to bring awareness to mental health, something she felt deeply about. She accepted the offer, eager to use her talent for something meaningful. Arjun supported her completely. He attended her workshops, helped organize her supplies, and even promoted her work through his business contacts. For the first time, their worlds, his logic and her creativity, began to blend naturally. One night, as they sat on the balcony watching the city lights below, Priya said, "You know what I've realized?" "What?" he asked. "That sometimes the people we least expect to understand us end up being the ones who do it best." He smiled softly. "And sometimes the things we think are plain turn out to be the most beautiful." She looked at him, eyes shining in the moonlight. "You really have become a poet," she teased gently. He laughed. "Or maybe I just finally learned how to see." They both sat quietly, their hearts full, knowing they had come a long way. From strangers bound by an arranged marriage to two souls who had found love not through grand gestures but through patience, kindness, and understanding. Neither of them knew what the future held, but one thing was certain. They had built something real. And sometimes, that's the only kind of miracle life needs.